Welcome to the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Together we explore the vast landscapes of life, delving into the rich soil of experiences, sowing the seeds of curiosity, and harvesting the profound wisdom that each episode unfolds. Welcome, everyone. We're here live at Heritage Headquarters in downtown Phoenix. We have a sustainability conference going on at the same time as we're doing podcasts in our studio right next to the big party. And my guest today, Dale Overton. And Dale, still up in Winnipeg, Canada.
Yeah.
Give everyone here a little bit of the highlights of your journey. You know, where you went to school and where you worked and all those things that got you to where you are right now.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, I have a master's degree in quantitative plant ecology, and have a passion for reclamation. It kind of drove me into this space, so to speak. And we started tinkering with microbes, looking at bringing soil back to the contaminated sites back up to health, so that we could reclaim them and revegetate them. And about 15 years ago, I developed a product called EcoT, which is an ecologically based product that brings functional microbes back into plant growing systems. Um, and part of what we do really revolves around advanced composting. So basically, building specialized recipes that can help us to grow functional microbes. And in that journey, kind of became an expert in composting, and obviously kind of a bit of a pioneer in the liquid biological amendment space. And man, it's been a crazy journey. Like it's this today we're on over 1 million acres, and we're working on some of the fanciest properties in North America. So it's really been an exciting journey. So
Wow. So I know you've done a few TED Talks. So anyone who wants to um, hear more about the things you've done, they can look for Dale Overton on TED Talks and really good information there. Um, the I saw you, I guess, it seems like it was like last winter or something, but it was actually in right after COVID. So I flew up there, tried to go in the summer, but the schedules didn't line up. You were moving facilities and went there on like the coldest day in Winnipeg with snow and that kind of thing. And that's a lot to say because Winnipeg is not a warm place to begin with. But different operation. When I went there, you had the Canadian Compost Council at your facility, and you took me to basically two different places. The first one, you were doing composting, and you were it was I thought it was the people who make the fake hamburgers with the peas, but I think it was actually a potato. I can't remember what it
that's
was.
correct. So yeah, so in kind of becoming a bit of a composting expert, we were actually headhunted by, in this case, J.R. Simplot, who processes a lot of potatoes. And in Manitoba, they have a super plant, and they wanted to actually build a composting program around all of their byproducts that come out of their facility. Instead of putting them in the landfill or treating them in different ways. So we actually ended up building a large scale industrial compost facility specifically to service that kind of local food processing industry in Portage, with a focus on JR Simplot's potato processing plant. So we set it up, we built some recipes based on kind of what we could get at large volumes in the local landscape, and we started building compost at processing about 200 tons a day of material coming into our facility.
Yeah, and you were taking, if I remember right, there was a local horse track. You were getting horse bedding, and you were
Correct.
getting this compost. There's one or two other things you were blending together.
Yeah, so like the tree byproducts from the arboriculture industry. So
Uh huh.
wood chips, broken up pallets, kind of anything that we could get that would add a bit of a carbon source to our composting process.
And you were doing it at a pretty good scale. It was a pretty good sized yard, and you had 5 semis, I think, if I remember right, that you
Yes.
were moving it, and so you were taking this primarily food waste, and diverting it, and some yard waste, and some of the horse bedding to create a nice blend, and then selling it back to local farmers there. And kind of interesting because we were there and it was freezing cold, and still able to compost and do all of that at the time. And then we went to your other facility where you had your worms, and you were doing bin worms, and you had a pretty good size trommel screen indoors in the warehouse, and you were taking that product. I'm not going to divulge your entire recipe, but and we're making a similar product too, but a little bit different because we're not selling it in liquid. And you sell your product too, if I remember right, um, in in, uh, um, in the raw form or the granular form, and you have your a couple of inoculants that you put in with it in a separate bag, but it allows people to make a fresh tea. Um, but you were at the time you were also able to filter. You had a pretty fancy high dollar. It took you years and years to make filter that was allowing people, the farmers locally, to be able to use it. Um, like a on-demand type of thing. So you would produce it, and within 2 weeks, they were putting it through their irrigation systems, and um, pretty cool setup. And that's kind of where I left you like 4 or 5 years ago. It seems like you and I were there like in this last winter. But so tell me what's happened since then. You sold off the composting part, but you're still doing the vermicompost, right? Because that's a big
Correct.
component in your tea.
Yeah, correct. I wouldn't even call it vermicompost. So, we use our worms as microbe engineers, like my little microbial
Okay.
engineers. We actually
Hmm.
raise them in a peat moss bedding, and they get fed a very specialized diet that's built to encourage functional microbes. So,
Got
some of the
it.
stuff that we're doing to really bring the science into it is we do metagenome profiling. So, we want to understand exactly what types of functional microbes we are getting in our products. So, for example, in our worm castings or in our fungally based wood chips composts or our controlled microbial composts, which are all, you call them compost, but they're very, very specialized recipes that we use to grow specific functional microbes. And we use metagenome profiling to really understand exactly what types of microbes we're encouraging. And then we can map them and follow them through their life cycle into an agricultural or an urban system. So now, I mean, we developed a seed coating that farmers can actually replace fungicide. You can replace a fungicide on your seed with our product and uh, have a much more resilient seedling that uses fertilizer more efficiently, right? And
Right. I
we've got,
remember you were doing the seed coating at the time. You were starting that whole process. Yeah.
yeah, we started that. Now we're on a million acres.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. And you're in North and South America at this point, or are you still primarily,
Well,
I
well,
mean,
we're in Canada, the United States. We're making a push into Europe. We've got a bunch of European countries that want to work with us. We're also working with some huge fertilizer companies to help them build more efficient products that help improve fertilizer use efficiency. Obviously, for example, phosphorus is a depleting resource that actually has a timeline on it. So we've been working with some companies to help use microbes to prolong the life of phosphorus in the system and still,
okay.
obviously create a profitable farming system for the farmers.
Right. Now, when you're selling your product, I know you have, do you have a retail product then that
So
you're
yes,
selling on
we
Amazon or on your website, or how does that work?
we're just launching it. I mean, look, we've really focused on commercial size stuff at this point, but we are actually launching a retail product line under EcoT. The first product that we're bringing to market is called Seed Success, and it's basically our seed coating that now
Right.
any gardener can use. And it's basically a blend of our inoculums that we turn into a powder that comes with a separate set of biostimulants. And you put that on the seed, and it just basically makes any seed um, really come out with germinate with a vengeance, so to speak, and just creates a
So when
really
they
resilience.
when a individual takes a seed packet, for instance, they would take that powder, and I don't know if you still do a two-part process where you have probably some seaweed or something to that nature, but you're taking you're mixing it together, and then you add it to liquid, to water, and then you would
Nope.
soak the seed in it, or no?
No, in this case, it's just a dry powder that you would coat your seed with, right?
Okay.
We try not to get the seed, that way you got a little bit of shelf life on it. You don't necessarily have to get the seed wet because dealing with liquids and seeding is a little bit can be challenging, right?
Right, right, right.
Um, we do have a liquid seed coating that we use in industrial agriculture. So if guys are, basically, um, taking a semi truck, for example, they can spray this product onto their seed, goes in their semi truck. From there, it goes into their seeder and directly into the ground. So we sell tens of thousands of liters of that product.
Wow. Okay. So that's the seed coating is powder. So do you have any kind of a sticking agent or anything for that's built
Yeah,
into that powder to keep it from just dusting off?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like a talc. It actually acts like a talcum powder. So we use things like rock dust, alfalfa meal, diatomaceous earth, humic acid. We use some long chain amino acids.
Hmm.
Some kelp as well, like you were mentioning. So we use a complex, complement of ingredients that work to help with seed sticking, but also create a food source for the microbes and begin that selection process for those really beneficial microbes.
Right. And I know you were really big on the metrics when we talked. You knew how much money a farmer was spending for compost and spreading compost and or using the liquids and it's critical because farmers never have enough money to do what they're doing, right? So knowing you knew by the acre how much money you were kind of your price point could be and where you could help them. And if I remember right, you had some pretty good metrics on um, the early germination of these seeds, which makes a huge difference in a crop, right? If you can get that crop to germinate a week or two earlier, it makes a big. So tell us all a little about that.
Yeah, so I mean, look, our goal is we want to be results driven, and we've been doing research now for 5 years. We spend a fortune on research. Again, looking at earlier germination, looking at drought tolerance, looking at nutrient use efficiency. So you're right, absolutely. Like our product helps plants germinate in cold conditions 2 to 3 to 4 days earlier than seeds that are conventionally treated. And when you live in, the northern part of North America, every single day counts in agriculture, right?
Yeah.
And
So
so
you
getting your
never know
seed,
what happens at the end of the season. That early frost, could be the end of your your entire crop.
of your crop. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So, like for example, corn farmers that are using our product that experience, for example, a -8 frost won't actually have to go out and reseed because our product actually provides resilience in that actual plant itself, and it enables the plant to focus sugars into its growing tissues to prevent them from freezing.
Right.
So it's like it enables a physiological response within the plant, and we've proven this.
Right.
So
Now,
yeah,
what I found interesting because I went out there when we were starting to do vermicompost, right, and we were composters, um, but I was still trying to figure out how the heck can you make money in this business. You literally were processing shit, and we both talked about the fact that bulk was really difficult to ship, right? So I had an order last year that was 900 semis. It's not, people are spending more money on trucking than they were on that. So you came up with the idea of doing more of a concentrated product, which is your seed coating, but also the ability to create these liquids that can be put into irrigation systems. And, you know, at the end of the day, we talk about soil health, and soil health has to do with carbon. So with the liquid products, maybe you're not getting quite as much carbon, but you're certainly getting microbiology going on, right? So, and that's the real secret for, you know, getting activity in your soil and to move things around and to help plants grow. Um, so you got out of the potato stuff, but you were running a profit doing that, right? And um, eh, I think you told me 2023 is when you got out of that, and that allows you really to focus on your primary product. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So now we're really just, again, focusing on our eco product and doing a little bit of product diversification, market diversification, again, coming up with a retail line. We're moving into the golf industry, sports fields, urban tree care, that kind of stuff. And we've been working with some landscape architects
Uh-huh.
um, on some extremely, high visibility projects, so to speak. Like Waterfront Toronto. We did Google Campus in San Jose. We're doing the YouTube headquarters. We're doing some projects in Austin, Texas as well. So there's just a big push in that landscape architecture community to build ecologically sustainable installs. And in order to do that, they require products like ours at the installation phase to be able to hand over a fully functioning system to the end user or the client.
Sure. So when you're working with clients, you've got a product, for instance, that the coding is pretty universal, right? You don't have to tailor the coding for Canada versus Florida. For the most
No.
part, you've got a product that will coat the seeds and it'll help those seeds germinate, and there'll be a healthy germination, probably help the roots as they have that early germination. Um, the and I'm not sure how much fungi activity you've got going on with that. Um, are you creating an endo or an ecto um, product when you're doing that, or is this primarily just working with the microbes?
So we build a product that what I call has ecological dexterity. So it doesn't matter what plant you're going on to or what type of soil you're going on to. There's a complement of microbes within our product that will be able to establish in that system, that plant. Um, we don't necessarily produce mycorrhizae in our process because they're very sensitive and
Right.
they don't like to get wet. They need to go onto a living plant. But what we have found is that our product encourages mycorrhizal colonization in a natural form. And we also have tons of fungi in our product, like saprophytic fungi, for example, that can bust thatch on golf course or degrade corn residue and recycle that carbon much more quickly. You'd mentioned carbon. Our liquids don't add carbon to the soil per se, but they add the ability for that soil now to recycle and integrate carbon more rapidly.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
and
if you
that's kind
think
of the
about it, usually, no matter where you are on the planet, there's some carbon source that landscapers or farmers or gardeners can add if they need it when they're doing their soil profile. But the most important thing really is getting the microbiology kicked off and working. And one of the interesting things that people don't realize is that um, it's it's real science, right? I mean, when you're um, and a lot of people, there's a lot of products out there that I'm always questionable about or question when they talk about different microbes and stuff, because every soil in each region has its own common microbes. So if you're trying to inoculate, and there's a lot of inoculants out there that they're pushing a certain microbe that you're putting a small amount on to a big field, and you're not really encouraging what's existing out there. So what you're talking about is that you have a a pretty good complement of microbes, because people don't realize is the expansion of microbes while they're actually working. So one family of microbe eats another, that kind of thing, and they, um, if you were to test microbes every day, they'd have, you'd have um, a different result, right? So um,
That's called
that's
succession.
that's been a big part of your science, right?
Absolutely. I mean, look, yeah, again, because I'm an ecologist, right? So we look at everything kind of from an ecosystems approach and an ecological approach. And again, that's just that ecological dexterity I was talking about. Single species microbes kind of they'll work really good in this soil or with this plant, but they don't have that dexterity to go into any system. And that's where, I'll call compost teas or vermicompost or those kinds of things kind of come into play. Our process is different than a lot because with our EcoT product, for example, we don't use waste products on anything. Like it's all very, very specialized ingredients that we pay for, and it's a very, very managed process. Um, so we're looking to basically it's ecological engineering. We're actually engineering specific functions that are typically missing in most soils. And we again use those metagenome profiling techniques to benchmark soil and to actually understand what's going on post application. So we've got projects now that are going on 5 years, long term projects that have shown significant changes in soil health and help building regenerative ag practices that are
Right.
economical and viable for farmers to actually implement.
So, Dale, I am just about complete with writing a vermicompost book and a
Okay.
compost book. And I'd love to have you in the book. I'm telling the story of when I went out to visit you, and my partner, Dan, didn't make it into Canada. They booted him
That's right.
out, so he never made it past the Calgary airport. And then the young intern still works for me now, who came had a head cold, so he was asleep in the back of the car most of the time. But we
That's
got
great.
there, and it was freezing cold, and we looked at everything, and you and I, we've been in the industry, and we understand the challenges. Just trying to find that space, right? To find that way to monetize. And the one thing you told me is, if you're composting, you need tipping fees, and we're finally starting to get tipping fees. Up until now, we're in big dairies, and we're paying the dairyman for the dairy product, and we've blended. We've gone on Amazon with more. I call them targeted agricultural targeted products, right? Um, and that kind of a lot of that is inspired by what you've done in your journey. And bottom line is, if you do one thing really right, you become the number one person in that space. And I think that's kind of where you are right now. And I love to see the success story. I'll bet you don't really miss doing the big, bulky composting. Um, and now you're allowed to really work with a product that can be shipped and be done smaller scale, but way more intense. Is that kind of the
Oh,
uh,
100%.
way to
100%.
to sum
100%.
it up? So,
Yeah, like moving really big things for little bits of money is a challenge, right? Whereas I really like the drill down focus aspect of what we're doing.
right, right. So yeah, your product had some worm in it, but I remember you're up in Canada, so you had the worms had a peat moss base because you're right there. I mean, literally peat right underneath your feet.
Correct.
And then you had a lot of different, like you said, you feed those worms a lot of different things, and you've figured out your kind of your package. So, what is the name of the? So we don't. It's eco. Can't read your shirt. Eco.
Eco tea is the product. Like eco tea,
Okay.
it's very
Ed,
innovative. It's ecological tea.
okay. Well, says what you do. So, where do we find you? Do you have a website? And um, uh, how do I? If I was in Phoenix and I wanted to buy some eco tea, do I go on Amazon, or you use a third party? Is it straight through your website? or do you have
So it would be
distributors?
so into the US right now, it would be straight through our website. We are registration in the US is a state by state process. So we're actually just getting all of our ducks in a row to get registered and
Yeah,
a whole
it's a
bunch of different
nightmare. Yeah, yeah. All
also
the
it's a nightmare.
OMRI certifications and boy, they're not cheap either. We've got
No,
close to
so
30
yeah, so like
products, and it's always a battle. You got to renew them, and you got to, stay with
yeah.
all the things you're doing. But so we can buy on the website. And it sounds like you're in some amazing locations. You got um, contacted by Google and some others, so
Well, we
people
get
know
contacted
they know who you
by
are.
this.
They're finding you, right?
Yeah, I would say it's more like Google had a mandate to build an ecologically functional system. So the landscape architect and the soil scientists that were building that system, they were the ones that headhunted me
Ah,
basically.
okay.
And now we help write the specifications on how to build these systems and then also how to test to ensure that you are in fact getting those functions, longer term.
Because you have a concentrated product, talking in terms of tonnage doesn't really matter anymore because if I remember right, you had a little seed packet or a packet for dusting the seed that was, super small. And that could handle a home garden, So how do you scale that? How did the operation scale now? Do you still have the same amount of worms, and worms are part of your base, of course, but how are you um, scaling now? What kind of volume are
Yeah,
you
we're we're
doing in
we're, we're
product?
scaling up in every way. So we're building right now. We're working with IRAP, which is the Canadian Industrial Research and Application Program, to actually build a state-of-the-art automated worm production facility.
Oh,
Um,
phenomenal.
so that will be our scale up to or the current model that we have, which is what you saw. But
Hmm.
we're building a fully automated version of that system that can allow us to, move on to, 5 to 10 million to 20 million acres of ag land.
Yeah. And to do 5 to 10, 20 million acres, though, again, you're not, for me to do it with our compost, that would be
It's all seed
so,
coating.
so many tons. I can't even, at 10 tons per acre. What, if I'm using your product, for instance, what is my ton per, it's probably not even a ton per acre. What does it get down to? Like a few hundred
So
pounds
it's
per acre?
yeah, it's like precision placement. So for example,
Right,
with
right.
our liquid products, we have an in-furrow product, you would go in at around 10 gallons an acre, right in the furrow where you're planting the seed. With our seed coating, I mean, like you said, that small bag of seed that you talked about, that will actually treat, 250 to 300 pounds of seed.
Right,
So for $10, you can treat, an acre or two worth of seed,
right.
and get results, right? And that's how we can scale out that size, that acreage size, right?
Yeah. Well, this is why you were always the smart guy. You knew not just the science behind what you were doing, but you learned the business models pretty quick, and that's kind of what I always appreciated with what you had. And you knew early on that to distribute, you had to distribute with smaller quantity. And also, farmers today, the industrial farmer really wants a precision product. Um, it's hard to put, the genie back in the bag and ask people to use, lots and lots of tonnage on their farm of compost, which I still do, and I still believe in that. But you've got a way of really changing a farmer's productivity and making it profitable, but on a scale that the farmer wants to deal with. A lot less labor to them. You can either inject your products or you can seed coat. Of course, that's the smartest thing right off the bat. So
Yeah.
it's great to see that you're still in the space and still surviving, and not just surviving, but you're thriving. Um, and love to see more of your product coming into town um, and down here to the U.S. Love to see what you're doing up there. And um, I think for anybody who's in our industry, we know there has to be more of us. It's not a competition. We need to see agriculture change to try to improve soil health. That doesn't mean you're going to change practices, industrial practices necessarily, but this is a step toward going back to, I think, traditional farming in a big way. But you're doing it. You're acknowledging the fact that you're not going to change a system that's functioning and working, right? I mean, industrial farming feeds the world, and so your product, even though I'm assuming you're organic straight across, but your product is working with regenerative farmers, but it can also be used by um, uh, any kind of an industrial farmer, right?
Correct. Yeah. With baby steps.
Yep, baby steps. It's it's well, I don't know if the world can afford to go too much slower than we have, but uh, it's good to see that there are solutions, and I consider what you have to be a viable solution. Um, one of the we have products that we've created that are designed now um, to be drought, to help with the droughts. So we have a soil, a sandy soil, a clay soil, and a silt soil drought blend and mix, and we think we're saving up to 50% water. We're working with universities. We've been doing trials now for several years, and we think that's a big game changer. Of course, that's still the um, bulky, clunky old way of doing things. But and there are some really good companies here. Bioflora is one of them. We've met with them several times and kind of look up to them. They're over 50 years old, but they've years and years ago they transitioned into liquids that could be used by farmers as well. I'm just a little slower on the take with some of that, because we don't do the liquids. That's a huge transition to go into a liquid space, but the cool thing about what you have is you also have that aggregate, that product that can be used on seed and seed coatings. So I encourage people to look you up and to find your product and to give it a try at home. And I'm sure you have different messaging on your website that can help steward people toward how this can be used for them. And looking forward to coming up and visiting your operation again, but next time in the summer.
Yeah, please do.
And the next time you're coming into the States, I know you vacation down here sometimes in the winter, so don't be a stranger. Come on, and
Absolutely.
I'll show you what I have, and you can tell me all the mistakes I'm making.
I can try to provide some advice anyway.
Right. Well, good seeing you again, Dale. I appreciate it, and I'll be in touch with you via email. If you've got, send me some old pictures of your food waste composting and some of the stuff you have right now, and I'll pop you in the book. I'll give you a preview of the book, so you can look at it and laugh, and then tell me some of the things that I'm missing. But I'd love to have you look and see what. So there's two different books. There's actually four different books, but the vermicompost one is one, and then general composting, which includes vermicomposting, and then it's urban farming, which kind of those all tie together. So, and then my last one is the kind of the 7 pillars of agricultural literacy is what I call it, and it gives people an idea because there's so many different forms of organic farming out there, right? There's and you get confused. You call it organic farming, and then it's regenerative, and then it's permacomp culture, and there's a million
Biodynamic, yeah.
biodynamics, and they're all very, very similar, but at the same time, they have different histories and they have a different place because they're, everybody, farming is a cultural practice, right? So kind of pick what you want. And at the end of the day, though, we need soil health and we need to be able to grow healthier plants. And, you're a big step toward doing that. And I'm glad to see you're still in the space, and I appreciate you being on this podcast, and look forward to looking at the preview of the book.
Awesome. Well, when you send it along, I'll definitely have a look. Thanks a lot, Mike. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks again, Dale Overton. Have a good day, and we'll stay in touch.
All right. Sounds great.
All right.
Cheers.
Take care. Thank you for joining the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Click subscribe and like for ongoing insightful conversations. Explore our webpage for show notes and additional resources. Visit our guests' webpage for deeper insights. Your engagement is the foundation of our journey, and until next time, keep pursuing wisdom.